Now, going hand in hand with the internet is the World Wide Web. So the next discussion will look at the World Wide Web as well as some of the applications that we do typically find on the web. So what is the web and how does it work? The web is actually a document management system. So if we look at it, it's a system of interlinked documents that we do find on the internet. In most cases, it contains a graphical user interface. For example, if you look at any website, you would find that it contains elements that represent applications and your general operating system interface. So you're going to have icons and links and a header and a footer and a content section, etc. And the web is actually one of the most powerful uses of the internet. So we typically find that we get content on the internet, but we can also have communication and interaction on it. So all of that is referred to as www. Now let's look at the infrastructure or the architecture for this. In order for you to work with a web page, you need to work with a web browser. Now web browsers do come in various forms and formats. For example, you might be familiar with Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome. There's been various other types, Opera, we get Netscape Navigator, there was even one called Dolphin. So typically companies went and they've created their own versions of browsers and they've released that to customers or clients. So what is a browser? A browser is an application that we use in order to access our sites and web pages. So it actually displays the content of the web pages. Now web pages are created by using a programming language known as HTML, the Hypertext Markup Language. And we're going to look at some examples of this a little later on. And in order for you to access the HTML pages, again you need to work with a protocol, and the protocol in this case is referred to as HTTP, or the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So whenever you type in an address, www.uwc.acza, it will send a command to the DNS server. It's going to locate that particular web server. A request will be sent, and that HTML content will be sent back to your computer through HTTP, which will be interpreted by a browser and displayed on screen. Additional www architecture includes TCP/IP that we've discussed in our previous section, and it also includes web servers. Now, if you think back to our discussion about client-server architecture, we said that servers mainly perform a specific function. So in this case, a web server will be dedicated to deliver web content to thousands of users. So web servers on the internet is actually a collection of tens of thousands of independently owned computers. They work together to provide the web content. So typically each and every company will have a web server and their websites will be hosted on that platform. Now let's look a little more at some additional terminology that we find when we talk about the web. The web is a menu-based system, meaning that whenever you go to websites or web pages, you would typically find that there's links or icons, and if you click on that, it would extend and it would show you further possibilities or pages that you can go and click on and link to. So there's various menu pages, screens, and all of these upon user interaction will appear on your computer. Data can also be presented on web pages in the form of ASCII characters. We do get sites where they incorporate word processing files, audio files, graphic, video, etc. So we do find that the web has actually grown from a very basic type of system to a very advanced system, where nowadays we find that there's a lot of interaction, user interaction, social media is included, there's video, audio, animations, etc. Now, it's not in the book and it's not important that you guys know that, but we actually have various generations for what is known as the web. Initially, the web or web pages were known as Web 1.0, and this was just your old-fashioned pages that had text and some basic images. That was extended because users wanted more interaction, and the next version that we found was Web 2.0. Now Web 2.0 had more user interaction and social media inclusion, so we found that people wanted to use Twitter and Facebook, and they wanted to contribute to the content, whereas before with Web 1 the content was delivered by specific organizations or individuals. With Web 2 we find that each and everyone that accesses the internet now actually has the ability to go and put content on the web. The last version that we find, and this one is currently still in development, is known as Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is where content will be generated automatically based on patterns that was detected for users. And we're starting to think here in terms of artificial intelligence and specific user interactions. So in the future, web pages or websites can be generated by computers, so it's almost Terminator style type things, where users won't be responsible for the actual content. Computers will find bits and pieces of content, put it together and generate websites. And to a certain extent we're already starting to see this if you think in terms of Google, if you think in terms of some of the new AI type inclusions in smartphones, where it picks up your patterns as a user and it presents you with information that it thinks is appropriate based on your user profile. The next series of definitions is quite important, and you guys need to know these. When we work with a web, we typically find these definitions, and the first one is known as hypertext. Now hypertext is actually all the elements. Now element can be referred to as tags or either the code that allow us to go and insert hyperlinks on our web pages. So if you want to move from one page to another page, you need to go and click on a link. So you need to click on the hypertext in order to jump from one page to another page. So what is a hyperlink? Hyperlink is the actual linking of words to web pages. So you will have a word, in most cases it's underlined, and when you click on that word it takes you to additional content, either additional pages, email addresses, etc. Now we said that in order for us to create websites we need to work with HTML, the hypertext markup language, which is a standard that allows us to go and specify web pages. We find a set of tags which allows us to go and format the website or to specify instructions for the website, and that actually indicates to the browser what should be displayed once the site is loaded. Finally, we need to talk about web pages. Now, what is web pages? These are the individual sites, pages of a site that will present us with the content. So these will be stored on a web server. They will be accessed through HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and they will be delivered to the user on the browser in the form of HTML. Now, some of you guys might have heard about hierarchical maps or the map structures of websites, and this is just an example of this. So typically you would find that if you go to a website, you can actually go and generate a structure for that site. So if we look at this example, we've got a shop. The shop has two categories of products that it actually sells, books and hardware. If we look at hardware, there's two types of hardware, desktops and notebooks. And then if we look at books, they've got a sales section, a fiction section, and a non-fiction section. Meaning that if I go to the website, the web page, shop, I will find two links, book and hardware. Depending on which one I click on, if I click on hardware, it's going to jump to the hardware page. That one will have two links, desktop and notebooks, and if I click on it, it's going to jump to either one of these two pages. Now let's look at an example of HTML. We said HTML is a markup language, it's a set of tags that we need in order to represent a web page. So if you look at your screen, the code presented here will actually generate this web page at the bottom right. So we do typically find that we have an open tag HTML, and it's just behind the heading here. Apologies for that. So you have an open tag HTML and a closing tag HTML. So these are the HTML tags. Then you've got a heading section and you've got a body section. In the heading section, we typically put in the title of the web page. We would put in any style sheets, which we're going to refer to a little later on, as well as additional information that will be used to go and categorize our web page on, let's say, search engines. And these are known as meta tags. If we look at the body section, this is the actual appearance of our web page. So we see that first of all, we've changed the color to this yellowish color. We've created a container where we've included the image as our logo. We've included a heading that says Fundamentals of Business Information Systems, and we've included the ordered list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've actually indicated the individual entries for that ordered list. So that's a small sample of a web page. Now let's go and look at some other languages that we might need in order to generate web pages. Typically, the basic form that we have is a HTML page, which is just what we've seen on the previous screen. However, we do find that with new web development standards, we have concepts such as CSS, cascading style sheets, which allows us to go and indicate the appearance of a particular web page. So in the past, it was combined with the HTML tags, but it was actually found to be easier to separate the appearance from the actual content. So that is your CSS. So you would find that you have your different tags, and then you would find settings for the different tags. Alternatively, if we want to represent information, we can make use of XML, the extensible markup language. Now XML allows us to go and represent information almost similar to what we've seen in databases. So in this case, we've got a book table, we've got 4 fields, title, author, publisher, and year, and that would represent one record or one entry. So if we have multiple book entries, you would find that this information would have been multiplied by the number of entries. If we combine CSS with XML, we get a new format known as XHTML. So XHTML allows us to go and represent the content with the appearance data as well as with additional data, our records that we want to portray. The next slide goes on and they talk a little about each of these concepts. So HTML we've discussed, XML we said is an extensible markup language, which indicates the structure of information and content that we want to display on a website. CSS we said stands for cascading style sheets, which is a file that will contain all the elements that will specify the visual appearance of a web page. And then very importantly, if we combine XML with CSS, it stands for XHTML. Now there's various programming languages that we can use in order to create web pages or web content. Some of these include Java, C++, JavaScript, VBScript, ActiveX, PHP, etc. Then we need to talk about web services. Now web services are actually standards and tools that allows us to simplify communication amongst websites. For example, if you think about a site such as News24, you would find that there's financial indicators, weather information, etc. Now typically we've got experts that generate those additional information. So News24 will link to other websites through web services in order to extract that information and display it on their pages. So just to summarize, we said we've got various programming languages, for example Java, which is an object-oriented language provided by the Sun Microsystems, and it's based on C++. Now at this stage we don't expect you guys to know the individual languages, just know that websites also make use of programming languages, and also know what is web services. Just coming back to programming languages, if we have small programs that's embedded within the HTML pages, These are known as applets. Web services, we said, is where we want to enable communication between websites. For example, use the information from one website on another particular website. These are mainly facilitated through XML, so it's the key in order to have your web services to function, and it's used within your web pages to describe and transfer the data between the various web service applications. Now let's go on and look at web content and applications. Now what we find is that many companies are nowadays putting their applications and more content on the web. So it's become a popular tool for delivering information. So how do we create websites? There are various tools available such as Adobe Dreamweaver, RapidWeaver, Microsoft Expression Web, NVU, which allows you to actually go and drag and drop and create quick websites. You guys, as part of a group assignment, you will create a website yourself by using existing websites. So you're going to use something like Weebly, which will enable you to generate your own website based on user requirements. Now there's another definition that we need to take note of. When we combine two or more web applications into a new service, it's known as a mashup. For example, if you go and look at portal websites, and we're going to talk about portals a little later on, where it allows you to have various aspects to a website. Your email, a news feeder, financial feeders, etc. These could be generated from additional applications or other websites, but now they would be combined into your personal portal. In our next section, we're going to continue and talk about internet and web applications and some of the terminology associated with that, and also about different applications of networks in our company, intranets, extranets.